because I thought he would be away telling people that I let him do that to me, that I was easy, that I was, you know, good for it. How fucking sad is that? How fucking sad is that? Hi, I hope you're all well. If you're new around here, hello, it's lovely to meet you. And if you're returning, thank you very fucking much for coming back. My name is ALANNA and I'm a 36-year-old lady living in Scotland, and that is where my accent is from. On this channel we predominantly talk all things beauty, skincare, hair care, lifestyle, travel-y, bloggery, vloggery bullshit. However, on this today I'm going to be talking about some pretty touchy subjects. If you know me by now, you probably know that I've got a pretty foul mouth and I do swear anyway, so if that's not your kind of thing, I completely understand. Please feel free to vacate. However, this is your trigger warning to know that this video we are going to talk about R-word and abuse and how it affects us, and me specifically, I want to talk about my generation. My generation. Just goes to show you what generation I'm in. And basically how I think that has affected a whole generation of young men and women, and now middle-aged men and women, and just how abuse doesn't need to be as obvious as what we think it does. Sometimes it can happen and we don't even realise. And I think for a lot of women my age, I know for a fact the majority of women my age have all probably had some sort of experience with it, and how upsetting that is, and how wrong that is, and how fucking sad that is. This is off the back of obviously the Russell Brand documentary over on Channel 4. And again, I completely understand if this is not your kind of video and it's not something you want to watch, feel free to click away. But this is your trigger warning to know that this is going to be pretty nitty gritty. So my apologies. But if it does sound like something you want to hear my thoughts on, then just keep on watching. Remember to grab yourself a cuppa as well, because this is going to be a long one. Okay, so as I've already probably stated in the intro of this video, just be prepared for a bit of a trigger warning here. If this is not the kind of stuff that you are able to watch just now or listen to, then just so you know, I will be talking about things like abuse, R-wording as well, sexual abuse, and basically just manipulation of people, and probably what they don't realise is right and what is wrong. Probably, I'm not going to say necessarily child abuse, but it might be as well. So I just want you to know that if you're not able to watch anything like that just now, or it's too deep and heavy for you, then this probably isn't the video to be watching from me. However, as many of you probably know, on this channel we're talking about beauty, skincare, blah blah blah, but if you know me in real life, or you speak to me quite regularly in the DMs and stuff like that, you will probably know that I am quite opinionated, and if something sticks out to me, then usually I want to talk about it. And at the moment, with the recent release of the documentary from Channel 4 regarding Russell Brand, yes, I wanted to talk about it. This is not going to be some sort of fucking drama, like here's a step-by-step guide of what happened. If you want to know that, then you can go and watch the Russell Brand documentary from Channel 4 with Dispatches. Go and do that. However, what I am going to discuss is the normality of what was discussed in that programme, especially from someone my age. I am 36 years old. I think the majority of you know that already. But growing up in the noughties and 2010s, that was like my formative years. I think in the millennium, I'd have just about been ready to turn 13. My birthday's in January, the millennium happened in New Year obviously, so the very next month I would have been 13. And so through those years, 2000s and the 2010s, it was my formative years, my teenage years, my early 20s, things like that. So I just wanted to have a discussion as a woman growing up in that time period about what was perceived back then, how it was seen, and just how normalised a lot of really inappropriate stuff was. I am going to be popping a little bit of makeup on while I do it. If any asshole says anything about how that isn't feminist, you can fuck off right now, quite frankly. because I just hate the idea that because women wear makeup, it either makes them, you know, they're wanting it, they're going against like the idea of natural beauty, all that other kind of shit. If that's what you're thinking, you can just take yourself out the door right now. But I think the majority of people watching this channel, you probably don't think that. So the other night, obviously, I watched the Russell Brand documentary. Me and Alan watched it, and my lovely partner Alan, who is an absolute fantastic man, I cannot fault him. Well, of course I can. Sometimes he doesn't do things around the house, but on the surface of it, I love him. I love him to bits. He's a wonderful man. He's a wonderful partner. He makes me a better person, and that's why I love being with him. He's just fantastic. He was watching it and he was like, this is fucking horrific. What a scumbag. And I was like, yeah, no, absolutely. Whereas my view was a little bit more like, I'm not shocked. I am not shocked about this. Am I shocked about it being Russell Brand? Am I disappointed about it being Russell Brand? I'm kind of here nor there. If you were a fan of Russell Brand, or if you are a fan of Russell Brand, if you're one of those people who are in the comments, a lot of things that I'm seeing at the moment, it's like, oh, I think he's funny. However, like, just again, take yourself out the door, because I don't think it really matters what the fuck comedy he was portraying or doing. It's kind of behind the scenes what was going on. He was a scumbag. He is a scumbag. Let's face it. I also do believe in innocent until proven guilty, and I know this is not every man. So we'll give him the benefit of the doubt. However, what was portrayed in that documentary, I cannot imagine wasn't true, because a company or a, what would you even call them, brand name such as Channel 4, I cannot imagine would leave themselves open to be liable saying those things, because if it wasn't true and if there wasn't some really fucking hard evidence behind that documentary, they would be leaving themselves open to being sued left, right and centre. So that is my opinion on that. However, as I say, when I was watching it with Alan, I was a little bit like, yeah, that all sounds like stories I have heard from women across the world. Stories I have heard from women of all ages, and people that I have spoke to personally in my own life, and people that I've spoke to online and seen their stories online as well. None of this appears to be shocking or new to me. Now, Alan's response to that was kind of, God, you must have hung about with some right horrible people when you were younger if that's what people were doing to you. And what I said to him was, you know, I'm not saying all of those things in that documentary happened to me. I am not saying that, you know, I was R-worded or that I was abused. Personally, that's my own thing to take on board. And if I've spoken to any personally, you may know more about that. However, I am talking about the kind of abuse that occurs when, in that day and age, they probably didn't even realise that it was abuse. And what I was saying to Alan that didn't shock me was, you know, the 30-year-old man with a 16-year-old girl. I mean, growing up in high school, you know, as I say, like, I would have been 13 in the millennium. I remember people, I would only been in second year at the time. I don't know what that is in England or in other parts of the world, but in Scotland, it's second year of high school. And I'd have been in second year at the time. I know for a fact, I went to school with girls who went out with boys who had drove cars. I say boys, men who drove cars. And we're not talking about them going out with the 17-year-old who's up in 6th year somewhere. Again, I still don't think that's necessarily appropriate, but we're not talking about them going out with the end of high schooler who's got a car. We're talking about them going out with a guy who is 19, 20, 21 and going out with a second year. Now, at a push, because I was one of the youngest in second year, they may have been 14, but, you know, that is a big fucking age gap. That is a big kind of control and a big fucking power dynamic that just isn't fair. It isn't right. And I also feel like even people who were my age at the time, let's take it up to when we're going on 14, 15, you're getting your first little boyfriends, girlfriends, all that kind of stuff. I remember, because I hung about with quite a big group of guys, there's a lot of locker room chat. And looking back on it now, a lot of that chat probably was completely inappropriate. However, also maybe a little bit exaggerated, because you know what people are like, especially teenagers and especially teenage boys, maybe giving it the big I am, and maybe some of it didn't happen. But I can bet your bottom dollar some of it did. I also think a really important thing to remember for my generation, I'm talking about millennials, but you maybe are somebody who's a Gen X or even a Gen Z who has had similar experiences, so I'm not undermining that. But as millennials, when I was at 12 years old, we didn't have a computer in the house. People didn't have computers in the house. They didn't have that. You maybe had one at school, but you didn't just have computers kicking about your house. It didn't happen. I think by the time I was 13, that's when things started to come into play. Mobile phones as well, like people started getting the first kind of Motorola's, the Nokias, whatever it was. But we went from a generation of children, let's say that word, or teenagers, pre-teens, whatever you want to fucking call it. We were children. Of finding a dirty magazine in the woods somewhere. It's actually a joke, I think, that Kevin Bridges says, and it's very fucking true. You would go out with your pals and you'd find it wasn't even a dirty magazine. It was probably a lingerie magazine. Like a lingerie booklet or some shit. Don't know where it came from. Kay's catalogue or something. You'd find it kicking about in the woods somewhere or in the fucking park, stuffed under a bush. And we boys at that time would be like, oh, boobies, blah, blah, blah. And it would be like some big fucking exciting thing because you have found a woman in a bra, right? We went from that to by the time I was 15, where I know for a fact I had a computer in the house at that point. It wasn't in my bedroom. It was in the study or a cupboard. There was actually a cupboard in my house that we called the study. It was not a study, it was a cupboard. But we went from having nothing in the house, nothing at 12 years old, to 3 years later having access to the internet, speaking to whoever and whomever, whatever age, around the world. And as I already mentioned, I knew plenty of people, boys and girls, who had computers in their own bedroom. And also for the majority of us, maybe some of us had Gen X parents, but I think the majority probably had boomer parents. And they didn't know what we were doing online. They barely knew how to switch the computer on. They had one and they loved to be able to show off to people like, we've got a PC. So fucking bougie, you know? But the fuckers didn't know how to use them. They didn't have a clue. They would have to get you to come along and be like, this is not working. Going to tell me what's happening here, Alanna? And I'm saying that and it's like my own parents. But for any of you out there watching, yous know you done it too. So here we were at 15 years old, going from 3 years before that having no access to anything like that at all. No education on anything like this at all because it was all fucking brand new to all of us. And no support from many parents, probably because they just didn't know. And so we went from finding nudie magazines or ladies in bras in the woods somewhere under a bush to being able to click onto hardcore pornography. Really hardcore stuff. Like, I'm not just talking about people having sex. I'm talking about things, and I'm also not just talking about things like, I'm going to say these words and if it makes you cringe, I'm sorry, anal, blowjobs, etc. Not just stuff like that. This will never be monetized. I don't really care. I'm talking about things like BDSM style stuff. I'm talking about things using toys and quite exaggerated toys. I'm talking about anal and things like that as well, although extreme versions of that. I'm talking about women being choked, women being bound, potentially men as well, and even down to things like scat. If you don't know what scat is, I'm not going to go and tell you to Google it because you will be horrified. If you do know what scat is, then you know what I'm saying, right? We went from being children at 12, having no access to anything like this, not even knowing it existed, to being able to click of a button, look for that kind of stuff and find it very, very easily. We also had chat rooms, and it'll be like a common thing. Everybody will know, if you're my age, what ASL means. ASL means age, sex, location. And you would go into a chat room and people would be like, hi, ASL. And you would just straight off tell them, 14 female, live here. I mean, nowadays, you'd be fucking horrified, wouldn't you? Now, I'm not saying you put your address on there, but maybe you would say Scotland. Maybe you would say a more precise area like I stayed in Fife at the time, Glasgow. But maybe you said something more specific, like the town you stayed in or the area of Glasgow you stayed in. That was up to you. But do you know what? A lot of people would have done it because they wouldn't have fucking known any better. We also had access to webcams, again, maybe a little bit further on than the age of kind of 13, 14. But I know by the time 15 came, loads of people had webcams. And people would be able to be like, oh, do you want to come on webcam and talk to me? I can't tell you how many times you think you're talking away to someone who seems like a nice person when I was 14, 15 years old, whatever it was, and you think you're talking to somebody that lives like, the next few towns along, they go to a school and then they're like, oh, can you put your webcam on? And you're sitting there like this, waiting for the webcam to come on, and a big cock shows up on the screen. And it's some man in his 50s who isn't who they said they were. And that was happening all the time. This is not fucking new. This has been going on forever. It's been going on before the age of the internet as well. However, this just made things so much more fucking accessible to everybody. And in our formative years, our generation, I think it bred a generation of young men who, I'm going to say, fell victim to. I think obviously they could type in what they were wanting to look for. They wanted to see boobies, they could see boobies. They wanted to see vagina, they could see vagina. If they were putting any other extreme things in, then I'm going to say they didn't just learn that from nowhere. Yes, okay, friends will chat, maybe older siblings, stuff like that. But I don't think it just came out of their own head. It probably was brought to their attention via the internet. But for the majority of young men, they maybe clicked on a site and thought, oh, okay, I want to go and see a lady with big boobs. I would like to see somebody having sex. You know, they're teenagers. We're all going through puberty. We're horny little bastards. But I can bet your bottom dollar they seen a lot of extreme stuff that they didn't even realise they knew what they were watching. And they didn't realise that what they're watching was not normal and was only made for the likes of adult content, extreme content, and was not what really happened in the bedroom when you became sexually active. Hate that phrase, but let's just say it anyway. I think that in turn left a generation of young women feeling like there was an expectation and feeling like this was normal because this is what we were seeing on the internet. Now, I'm not going to excuse little girls not looking up porn. We probably did as well. I know for a fact I probably did. But we were the same. We didn't know what we were looking at. We didn't have a clue. Maybe you were sitting in a group of pals, you know, a couple of girls, 3 or 4 guys, you're all sitting there and you're looking something up and you're fucking laughing at it. You're being like, oh my God, that's hilarious. I can't believe it. 2 girls, 1 cup. Let's talk about that. I'm sure we all fucking remember that. You were grossed out by it. You were like, oh, that's fucking disgusting. Why would somebody do that? Blah, blah, blah. But there's some poor critter out there that probably watched it and it switched a little switch on them and they thought, I want to see more of that, right? I'm not talking about extreme 2 girls, 1 cup. Maybe there were people like that. But I'm talking about the stuff that means boundaries started to get pushed. We were no longer teenagers who maybe dated each other and it was like, oh, maybe we're going to kiss tonight. Oh, maybe we're going to touch each other's, like, you know, boobs or whatever. Oh, maybe we're going to do this. That all was probably still going on the surface of it. I'm sure many of you experienced those awkward moments when you were growing up. But I feel like it went from that to kind of, well, obviously, sex is on the table. Obviously. But what else is on the table? I think it went from 0 to 100 in a very, very short space of time for our generation. And I put up a couple of stories on Instagram yesterday, once I'd watched the documentary, to have a chat about this. And so many women messaged me, so many, and so many of them with such a similar story and such a similar sad expectation that now they look back on and think, I always blamed myself. Why did I put myself in that position? And I just thought that was normal. I just thought that's what everybody was doing at the time. And let me tell you, probably everybody was doing it at the time and you are not alone because of a cultural breeding that occurred in our generation in our teenage years. Now, Russell Brand obviously didn't fucking invent the internet. He didn't put it on all our homes and he didn't tell us all to click and watch whatever. However, as I said, a cultural society, an expectation of what was funny at the time. We had the likes of Zoo magazine, Nuts, all that kind of stuff. The idea that, oh, she's gagging for it. All of that, it was all there too. That idea if a girl who was a teenage girl, and I'm sure this probably still happens to this day, slept with 1 or 2 people, she was a slag. Whereas if a guy done it, they were a fucking legend. Guys sitting talking about what they had done to partners, and again with the introduction of mobile phones and then smartphones and stuff like that, taking pictures of people in provocative positions and sharing them amongst friends. It was all fucking going on. It was the Wild West and nobody knew that it was completely inappropriate and essentially abuse. And the reason why you won't hear people talking about it that often, and I'm on here talking about it, is because for so many women, they are ashamed. They are ashamed because they were put in a position when they were younger, when they knew no better, when they thought this is what the expectation was, this is what guys want. Whether it was an older guy or someone in a similar peer group to them, this is what they thought was normal. And because of that, they've probably never even told some of their best friends. I'm going to give you an example here, and I'm not saying it as any one person, but however, I did get a few people messaging me with a very similar story to this. So we're going to use something kind of simple like anal. It's not simple as such. It depends on what your level of comfortableness is on that topic. And I just want to say right now, I am no prude either. But there is a big difference between being adventurous in the bedroom, wanting to try things out in the bedroom, and consent and knowing that you're both consenting adults, both enjoying it and wanting to do it. A lot of people message me, and this was the gist of the story, so let's just give them different names for the purposes of autonomy. Autonomy? Anonymous. What's the word? Anonymousness. I can't remember the word, I'm sorry. So, women messaging me saying, oh my God, I never realised until I was later, or until I was a mother myself, or until I was old enough to know better, or it was brought to my attention by media in the more modern day that this was not right. They were maybe in a loving relationship. They'd maybe been going out with someone for a year. They'd maybe been already having sex with that person, having good sex with that person. There's no reason why it wouldn't be. However, he starts seeing things off his mates. He starts seeing things on the computer. He wants to try anal. That's the example we're going to go with today. And they're dubious and they're a little bit like, don't know if I'm into that. Maybe they've even looked at something together on the internet and been like, and she's like, oh, I don't know about that. I'm not into this. And he's like, well, can we just try it, you know? I think women our age could write a book on the fact that the amount of times they've maybe been told, you would try it if you loved me. If we really love each other, we should do it. That kind of bullshit, which I have to say, I wasn't someone to fall fail for that, but it doesn't mean you're stupid if you did. Things like, let's just try it, and if you don't like it, we don't have to do it again. Things like, you might really enjoy it. And then you kind of feel that situation where you're like, well, am I a prude? Maybe I should want to do this. Everybody else seems to be doing this. Let me tell you right now, it doesn't matter if everybody else was doing it or they weren't. You had every right to say no. And no means no. No is a full sentence, and you shouldn't have to say it more than once. Now, for some of those people, they might have went on, tried it, and actually really loved it and enjoyed it. And then that was something they thought, well, might be doing that again in the future. Maybe I'll try that out again sometime. But for many poor souls, they probably gave it some thought, hearing many comedians at the time joke and talk about stuff like that. Talking about, actually that was on the documentary when he's talking about gagging type of oral sex and mascara running down your face. Again, all kind of pornography that was available to us at the time and still is. All that kind of stuff. So it's in the common media, it's all a running joke, blah, blah, blah. And you think, okay, let's try it. Let's do it. The first part of the deed is all consensual. That's fine. You love each other. Yous have had sex before. Maybe you haven't, but that's by the by. Everything's going well. Yous are enjoying things. And then they say to you, let's just try it. Let's just do this. Or they're trying to put something in there that shouldn't be there. Not necessarily their own piece of equipment, but other things. And they're saying to you, like, just give it a go, like, we'll just try it, blah, blah, blah. And then you kind of go, right, okay then, let's do it. Like, I don't want to be, you're coerced. You're not saying no, but you're not saying, yeah, let's do it either. And that is a massive thing that I will be sure to teach my own son. You should be getting an enthusiastic yes. Not a, all right then. No, just no. And you should be checking in with your partner throughout the situation. Are you still okay with this? So anyway, you start the deed, whatever it may be. And all of a sudden, you realise that you are not comfortable with that situation. And you don't want to be doing that thing. However, they continue to do it. It could be a tiny thing like touching a bit of your body you don't want touched. It could be something much more major. But all of a sudden, you are not comfortable with that. I'm afraid to tell you that is also assault. that is also rape. And if you've been in that situation where you have already been consenting to the initial acts and then even consented to the act that's been brought to the table, and halfway through you're not enjoying it and they don't stop, then I'm sorry to tell you that that is also assault and rape. And I know for a fact, with a sad, sad fucking heart, tears are coming into my eyes now, that so many women have been there. So many fucking women I know personally have been there. From generations before me and generations younger than me. I know for a fact you've all fucking been there. So here comes the next point. And this was a point me and Alan also discussed. And I said to him, you know, you probably know someone yourself who has done something like that. And he was like, what are you talking about? Obviously, because we were watching Russell Brand. And I was like, I don't mean rape someone. I don't mean it that way. But you probably know somebody in your group of friends or extended group of friends. You'll know a man, who has pushed boundaries like that. And he was downright like, absolutely not. I don't know anybody like that. That would never happen. I would never do that to a woman. Absolutely not. That's not how I was raised, blah, blah, blah. And I told him, you're being naive. And again, he was like, no, I think you just hung about with some horrible, horrible people when you were younger, Alanna. And it's funny because the next day when I did share on stories on Instagram, and more women were messaging me saying, yep, he was like, I am so sorry. I am so sorry as women. That's what you guys are dealing with. And I don't think he was naive to the fact he knows women go through a lot of shit. But it was a realisation moment for him, I think, because he thought, fuck me. Because if that many women have experienced it, then there has to be that many men doing it. So for anybody watching this documentary, giving it the big like, oh, innocent to proven guilty, and fucking these women are just after money, they're just after this, they're just after that. The majority of the people in that documentary wanted to remain anonymous. Probably because, even while remaining anonymous, they are already experiencing horrible, horrible name calling and backlash and disbelieving them. Not believing what they're saying is true. And they haven't even come out as someone saying, hi, my name is so-and-so and this happened to me. It is so hard, so incredibly hard for women to stand up and say something like that has happened to them. And the sad thing as well is, as I had said to Alan, you probably know someone who has done something like that. Because it was so normalised in my generation, because it was just seen to be part of the party, what was bringing to the table, so many men won't even realise they've done it. And if any men are watching this just now and they think, oh yeah, whatever, Mrs. fucking Me Too, I want you to have a good hard think about your relationships, because as I said, in any aspect of the bedroom, no matter if you've had sex once or 1,000 times, if someone is not enjoying something, you should be checking in with your partner throughout and making sure it's something they want to do. And if you even for a second think, this isn't it, this is not going well, you fucking stop and you say to them, it's all right, we don't have to do this. Don't get me wrong, they might turn around and go, I was fucking really enjoying that, why did you not? And if that's what they do, fine. But if they don't, and you can see they're uncomfortable, stopping is the right fucking thing to do and speaking to them about it. And if you've not done that, then you're a fucking scumbag. However, as I say, you might be a good guy, just going through his life, living his life, having a nice time, not even thinking about that person you had a one night stand with 20 years ago. I think there was a lot of us, male and female, but a lot of us in that generation that, as I say, fell victim to that. The women, obviously, but also the men, because it was so normalised. I am not excusing the behaviour, not in any way, shape or form. But if you are that man and you think, God, I maybe did have an experience like that, and if I could go back now, I would change it, then I just want you, especially if you're someone who has children of their own, to fucking instill it in your children and make sure that it's not normalised that women should be treated this way, that they are a fucking lesser person, and that you doesn't matter, they started to say yes and then they changed their mind. No, And especially to you that have children, and I mean, God almighty, if you have a daughter, just think about it. If someone done that to your daughter, how you would feel. You'd probably want to kill them. You would probably want to fucking kill them. And if you have a son, my God, if I ever found out Jack done that to someone, I don't know what I would do. I would be, my heart would be torn out my body, because I would like to think that with him only being as wee as he is, I will bring him up appropriately to know what is right from wrong. And I really, really hope that in this day and age, I think a lot of people will be like, oh, TikTok's ruining young people, or social media is ruining young people. And of course it has its vices. But I think youngsters and teenagers now know so much more about their rights. And it is not normal that, oh, she was asking for it. It is not normal she was dressed up like that. She had hundreds of makeup on. She was like flirting with me so obviously. That is not normal anymore. Whereas in our generation, I feel like it was seen as normal. And so therefore, there were some men who now, as I say, are good guys, living their life, won't even be aware that they've done it. But I'll tell you who will be aware. The women that it happened to. Especially from the people who messaged me. People who messaged me with a similar story to the one I've just told you, saying, I was so ashamed. I was so ashamed. I was so disappointed in myself for putting myself in that position. I didn't want to let other people know that that had happened. And because I thought he would be away telling people that I let him do that to me. That I was easy. That I was, good for it. How fucking sad is that? How fucking sad is that? Sea change if it isn't already, because my God, it is totally unfair on women to feel like as if they were the one that done something wrong, when quite simply they were put in a position they were not comfortable with, and when they let someone know that, they didn't stop doing it. Now if we take it back a little bit, it comes down to other stuff as well. I had other people messaging me being like, simple things, like someone grabbing your arse in a nightclub. I could tell you 1,000,000 times that happened to me when I was younger. 1,000,000 times. Being in nightclubs, especially if you were like at a kind of, I wouldn't say a rave, but like in close proximity with people. That's what I mean. Maybe in a mosh pit or something like that, if that's your kind of jibe. Although, I have to say, I always found it was worse when I went to more mainstream clubs. If I was in an alternative club, I'm not saying it didn't happen, but in mainstream clubs, it was as if like, there's a piece of meat, I'm going to grab it. It was terrible. So stuff like that, people shouting at you from across the road. Another friend of mine told me the other day, she was in London, she's walking down the street, she was in a dress and some knee-high boots, and she told me that this group of guys started shouting at her and her friend, and she was like, not even paying them attention. Didn't even look twice at them, just let it slide. And that's the fear women have in the street every day. Like, you could just be walking down the street doing absolutely fuck all, and all of a sudden a group of guys is shouting at you. Now, if you are a beautiful woman, like my friend, obviously that is going to raise more attention to these scumbags. And they ignored them, and then the next thing was that they were ugly, they were bitches, stuck up, probably didn't look as good without their makeup on anyway. These two women were just walking down the street. They weren't even fucking talking to these scumbags. Again, so that's where my point is. Like, I think that this culture is still very much here. We're not getting through it. But I feel like us as a generation, this age group, it was almost instilled in us. And we didn't even realise it. We didn't realise that you could say, I don't care, I'm not doing this. Or even like 2 days later, when you think, I wasn't comfortable with that situation, I'm now going to go to the police about it. Because again, back then, and probably still now to an extent, if you went to the police about something like that, my boyfriend stuck something up my bum and I didn't want him to. But you were already shagging him. I hate to break it to you, but I'm telling you, and I know you'll know as well, you wouldn't have been taken seriously. You just wouldn't. It just wouldn't have been taken seriously. And it would have been a matter of like, you were already having sex. If it was your boyfriend, it's like, well, you are together. Yeah, but you still shouldn't have done it. And I asked him not to. It just wouldn't have been taken seriously. Assault doesn't have to be someone jumping out a bush. and grabbing you and raping you. That's not what it has to be. And also, just so you know as well, it doesn't have to be your creepy old uncle or your dad or whoever else it is to be child abuse. You could have been a 15-year-old with a 20-year-old and it's still child abuse. It doesn't need to be the idea of movie style child abuse. Unfortunately for some people, it is the movie style situation, and I feel like it doesn't matter whether it's that or the 15-year-old one. You are still manipulated. You are still coerced. You do not have the mentality at 14, 15, probably even 16, even though that's the legal age of consent here in the UK. You do not have the same mentality as somebody if they are in their 20s and 30s. You just don't. And to any of the men who are with people with that kind of an age gap, ask yourself why nobody your own age is going out with you. Just saying. Because if you're still chasing people who aren't mentally at the same capacity as other adults, then it says more about you than you will ever fucking know. Obviously we hear about these creeps like Jimmy Savile, now Russell Brand, etc. I don't actually think necessarily Russell Brand's like the guy that was like, I need to go for children. It's the excitement of, I'm with someone who's never done this before. I'm with someone who's almost subservient to me and is only going to be with me because they know no different. And if you don't realise that as an adult, how fucking wrong that is, then Jesus Christ. Doesn't matter if somebody is 16 and you're 33 and they're giving you the big fucking like, I really like you. You shouldn't be with them. Even if it is consensual, because their idea of what is consensual is massively different from the fucking reality of what is. People are now bringing up the fact that one of the British Bake Off hosts, I'm not going to name him, you'll all know who I mean. And I remember this, and I don't think I gave it much thought at the time. I didn't realise he was as old as he was at the time. I felt like maybe there was an age gap, like Pixie Geldof, right? She was 16 at the time and they were friends. And I thought this person was maybe in their kind of early 20s, mid 20s, which again, as I say, the age gap is still too big. But I thought she's like a celebrity in different circles and she's 16, 17 and they're pals because they hang out in the same circles. I had no idea, it just didn't dawn on me at the time that actually he was 30 odd or 30. What? What are you hanging about with a 16-year-old for? What are you doing? Like, honestly, as I say, I wonder if these men who now maybe have children and girls of their own look back and think, fuck was I up to? What the fuck was I up to? Because mentally, you obviously didn't have the fucking maturity to speak to a woman your own age, or even not speak to a woman your own age. That whole fucking commitment thing. Maybe some women in their late 20s, early 30s are like, you know, I'm ready to settle down with my family. And you're out there being a fucking rock star. Like, talking to girls at 16. Get a grip of your life. It ain't new. We all seen it. I don't understand how this is like some sort of scandal. Because at the end of the day, it's been happening for years. It will continue to probably happen for years, unfortunately. I just really hope now young people are so much more aware of their rights. So, I think that's where I'm going to leave it. It's probably all I have to say on the matter. But what I do want to do is just let people know that you're not alone. The amount of messages that I got from women experiencing something very similar to what I've just spoke about, whether they were in a loving relationship or a guy they'd seen a few times or a one-night stand, just growing up around young people at that time, and it was deemed that this was the normal things to be doing, hanging out with guys who were like 10 years your fucking senior. And I don't care what you say, at 14 you might think you know it all, but you fucking don't. And again, me personally, I never ever had that kind of an age gap relationship. I think I was too terrified of my own mum and dad to take somebody like that home because, let's fucking face it, they would have hung, drawn and quartered me if I took anybody that was 10 years my senior home. However, where were the other people's parents? Because I know for a fact, there was girls that knew they were going out with guys who were like 22 with a car. What were their parents doing? Why did they think that was okay? And if you're a parent now and you've got a teenager and they're maybe like 16 and they're going out with a 22-year-old, have a fucking word with yourself. Just have a word with yourself. have a word with them. No matter how mature you think your 16-year-old is. And at 16, are you going to be able to, you know, lock the door and keep them in the house? No, of course you're not. But maybe just start thinking about the conversations you should be having with them. Because I feel like if you have a good relationship with your parents, and maybe if I'd had a better one with mine, then you could have had conversations like that. I'm not saying no teenager's gonna go home and be like, me and wee Jimmy were doing this last night. Of course not, of course not. But have conversations where your teenager feels comfortable enough that they will come to you and say, you know, they've kind of said we're going to try this, or they want to try something new. And you can then discuss with them, well, how do you feel about that? Is that something you'd want to do? Talk to them about these things. Don't make it a dirty secret. I'm not saying over-sexualise them in any way, shape or form, but talk to them in a way that they will feel comfortable coming to you. I moved out of the house at 17. I wasn't there. Nobody really knew what I was doing for fucking 5 years of my life. And I'm not saying anything, like, thankfully for me, I wasn't R-worded or anything like that. But think about being able to talk to them so that they feel comfortable to come and talk to you. Because then you might avoid situations where something happens to them that they will look back in 20 years and think, I was so ashamed of that. I didn't tell anybody about that. Try and avoid those situations. So talk to them more about it. I know this has been a bit dreary. It's been a bit down. But it's just been a lot that's been in my mind recently. And I think as adults and as women, and especially people who grew up in the noughties and 2010s, I hope to God it gives you some sort of solace to know you're not alone out there. And if anything like that has ever happened to you, did ever happen to you, then just know that it wasn't right and it wasn't your fault and it shouldn't have happened. And we'll just try our best to make sure more stuff like that doesn't happen. There's always going to be bad people out there. We can't change the world. It's always going to be the case. However, for the people that I spoke about that probably didn't even realise they were doing anything wrong, maybe we can change that. And that's what I would like to think we could do. So I'm going to leave it at that. I'll see you all again in the next one. And I hope you are all well. I'm sorry for depressing you. Bye.